Kelly Rossman is rocking our house right now. In fact, our Gillespie Group storefront studio, the president and CEO of the Rossman Group, is here with us on television and on the radio. Welcome to the party.
Why, thank you, Michael Patrick.
And I saw the way Kyle Melinn from MERS News lit up when you walked into our studio here. It's a friendly relationship.
Oh, yeah. She's one of my biggest fans, and I'm one of her biggest fans.
That's
we joke
terrific.
about that all the time.
Yeah.
I always say that she's my second biggest fan, below my wife.
I noticed, too, that you were a sponsor of the debate last night on television.
You know, actually, I think what we sponsored was the
after
piece
thing?
after,
Yeah.
the afterglow, so to speak.
That was entertaining. Very entertaining.
You know what it was? It was a really interesting mix of folks. You know, it was Ron Swankowski, Chuck Stokes, Bill Ballinger, and I never
Vicky
caught
Thomas, too.
Vicky Thomas, that's right.
Yeah.
So it was really fun, but frankly, can I just ask a question? Besides those of us who sort of have to watch this stuff, who watched it last night?
Well, like Kyle said, there was Major League Baseball, NFL football. 60 Minutes was delayed because of football, but I mean, you know, it's a Sunday night.
Yeah, and that was a good baseball game, let me tell you, especially if you're a Giants fan like myself.
Or you were sleeping off your hangover from the Michigan State game, maybe. I don't know, but that's kind of why we're doing this morning, because we figure, you know, people are busy and maybe they didn't have time, so we're kind of reviewing the audio and talking about what happened. And in that post-event that you sponsored last night on television, well, with Tim Skubic, the questions that were very interesting to me were, which candidate would you rather have a beer with?
Well, you know, I don't drink, so neither.
Well, I see you dunking your tea bag there.
I am.
That's not a Tea Party symbol or something like that, is it?
No, it's not.
Not
No,
secret
no,
code
no,
or
no,
anything
no.
like you're not pulling an Osama bin Laden or
That's
anything.
pretty funny, actually. Very good, Michael Patrick.
So which one would you rather have tea with? Maybe not you personally, but overall, what do you think people would say?
First of all, I know Virg Bernero
Yeah.
really well. I don't know Rick Snyder very well at all, so I'd be curious to sit down and spend some time talking to him. I'm not sure he'd be as entertaining as amusing as Virg, but they're both really interesting cats. They just have really different styles and really different backgrounds. So I'd enjoy talking to either one of them. It'd just be a different kind of a gig, I guess.
He was cool as a cucumber Saturday night after the football game. I saw him hanging around in the parking lot
Who
there,
was?
Rick Snyder.
Rick.
And he said, well, it was already 8 o'clock, and he said, I'm going to take my daughter to dinner tonight for her birthday at the West End Grill, I think it's called, his favorite Ann Arbor restaurant. And I thought, man, I think I'd be going to bed on a night before a big debate like that. And he said, I'm not nervous. I've raised 2 adolescents. I'm not going to lose my temper with Virg Bernero. I said it might be kind of the same thing.
Oh, that's interesting to very subtly compare Virg to a teenager. That's
what he
kind
did.
of cool.
He had his Ralph Lauren amazing blue shirt on, but the bus, the Nerdmobile, had green paint and blue paint because his logo is green and blue. And
There's
so
a
he figured he
smart
had both
boy.
covered.
There's a smart boy. That's gubernatorial right out of the gate.
The other question in that post-debate show, which candidate do you think has a better idea of what they're getting into? And Kyle earlier said easily Virg Bernero.
Oh, absolutely. There's a huge difference between the boardroom and the rotunda, the legislative experience. And Virg definitely knows what he's getting into from that perspective. The one thing that Rick does have going for him is sort of the... because he doesn't know the rules of the game, I think he may be blindly oblivious in a good way to the things that maybe should be done.
Like people who get married for the first time.
Well, sure. See, now Kyle has a
Okay, so it works.
For some of us have a couple of rough drafts under our belts, so to speak. But here's the beauty of Rick that I think Virg may not have from that inexperience of the legislative process. And I think that Rick may well have an advantage by going in and being respectful of the process and respectful of the individuals in a way that Virg may not be, because Virg has already been there, done that. He knows everything.
Kyle, how would you have answered this question if Virg Bernero had said, and let's say you're Rick Snyder, and he had said, look, we've had 8 years of somebody in office, in the governor's office, who had no legislative experience. If you want that again, go ahead and take a chance and vote for Rick Snyder.
Well, I would say that it doesn't matter if I've had legislative experience or I've had any type of experience. What I bring to the table is good experience. I bring a proven track record of creating jobs. I think that's how I would have spun it.
And what about the fact that Virgin Monero could have said, Kelly, corporate America's gotten us in all this trouble. Why would you look to someone from corporate America to try to solve it?
Well, I think Verge did do that in many, many ways.
Yeah.
Where I think that Rick maybe lost an opportunity, and Kyle and I actually talked about this last night, is that Rick did not, at least last night, really push back on Verge as being a career politician. I mean, when it comes right down to it, Verge in a governmental setting has helped set the table, to use his own phrase, in a way that sort of encourages economic development. But Rick has actually created real jobs and real investment and real growth. And, Rick really doesn't push back on Verge in terms of, look, you're a career politician. I'm a career job creator. That's a big difference. And the other thing that I think really the distinction never is as clear as it could or should be, and that is all of the criticism that Verge piles onto Rick in terms of Gateway going global and this new company, this Dacera thing that kind of came out of the gate yesterday. And that is that economic development is a global game. The world is flat. And people need to be way less parochial about recognizing that. And that debate, and again, Kyle and I talked a little bit about that last night, that debate really doesn't really pop up in a significant way. There are all kinds of little sound bites, but no real philosophical underpinnings. Verge accused Rick of taking advantage of enriching himself with Handy Lab. Well, Handy Lab is a huge Michigan success story. It's a venture capital investment that went public, and it's a very cool thing. And to criticize Rick for helping create a company that has ended up standing on its own is really misguided, in my opinion.
Speaking of sound bites, there was that moment where Rick Snyder said that the Michigan business tax and surcharge are dumb and dumber. But Virgin Monero came right back and said, it's funny that he talks about Dumb and Dumber because his running mate's one of the guys who wrote that.
Well, I know that he said that, and that's been some criticism. But to be fair, Brian Calley was in the work group that created it and was a minority freshman member of the House.
Close enough.
He had a little bit of input, maybe. But to say that Brian Calley wrote that Michigan business tax is like saying, I'm taking over this show. It's just ridiculous.
And soundbite, we heard it earlier.
I'm out of here.
And we heard it earlier that Rick Snyder actually said, there he goes again. We heard that clip a little bit earlier, evoking the Ronald Reagan, there he goes again, right?
Yeah, and I think that he had that already in the can, ready to go. I think debate prep pounded that in pretty good.
Well, and what did you think was sort of the soundbite of the night?
Mr. Snyder, how could you? I thought that was Virgin Monero's best shot.
I'd agree.
Oh, now that's interesting because I actually thought the best and maybe most unexpected line was the Snyder, speed is not substance. After one of Virgin Monero's 110 miles an hour responses, at one point Snyder says, speed is not substance. And I thought, I loved that.
That's coming up, actually. We'll have that audio
good.
in just a minute. The other line, too, though, is, Mr. Snyder, what did you sacrifice? That could resonate, too, with the rank and file.
I thought that did resonate a little bit, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's hear that. In fact, the question here that we're going to hear, and Kyle Melinn, I know you have to go, but thank you very much for being with us this morning, and we'll read you at mersnews.com, as always.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks, Michael Patrick.
Here is the question about sacrifice.
Well, Mr. Snyder, Steve asked you all earlier about sacrifice, and taxpayers in Michigan, many taxpayers in Michigan, would like a lot of that sacrifice to come from the public sector workers who have seen their incomes grow 15% over the last decade, while per capita income in Michigan fell 21%. How much can public sector workers expect to give back under your administration?
Well, there are two parts to that. The first piece, I say, is we need to look at what's comparable with the private sector, and then secondly, we need to ask what's financially affordable. Those are the two benchmarks. But we also always need to remember we're talking about people and their families. This is a serious issue. And so we need to come up with a solution to last for the long term. How we've done it in Lansing the last few years is a failure. It's a piecemeal approach. It's about talking about retirement one year, health care the next time. It's the death of 1,000 cuts. My view is let's get compensation on the table to see how we do shared sacrifice, including the governor being part of that process, of us all sharing in what needs to be done to get government on a positive path where people don't need to be looking over their shoulders to be tapped on again, and they can focus on being more productive, more excited, and looking towards the future instead of looking over their shoulder all the time.
Mr. Bernero, what sacrifice can public workers expect?
Well, if you want to know what a person's going to do, the best thing is to look at what they've done. And when times got tough in Lansing, I led by example. I cut my pay. I doubled what I pay for health insurance. I gave up benefits. I didn't just ask the workers to sacrifice, and I'll do the same at the state of Michigan. I asked Mr. Snyder to say what sacrifices he made at Gateway when he became a millionaire while those jobs were outsourced. I didn't get an answer. I asked how many millions he made when Handy Lab was sold to him when he was president. He talks about jobs he's created. That must have been in the distance past, because the only jobs we can find that he's creating now are in China, are overseas, or in another state. We need somebody who's going to create jobs here in Michigan. That's my track record. That's what I've done, and that's what we need to be doing, is growing our economy for Michigan people, putting Michigan people to work. That's what I've done. I know we can compete because we're doing it, and we're competing using economic incentives. My opponent has said he's against the use of economic incentives. I say we have to use every tool in the toolbox. We can't afford to be hamstrung, to tie our hands behind our back when we're in a global economy. We are in a battle for our future. We've got to use every tool available.
I don't think there's a huge amount of disagreement in terms of the need for economic development. I do think that, Burge makes a point in terms of what did you sacrifice, but underlying all that is somehow it's bad to be successful in creating business, because those who successfully create businesses do ultimately profit individually. So, I would love I want 100 words or less, and I want what's really at the core of this response? Forget all the rhetoric. What's at the core? I don't give a winner to either one.
Take away the class warfare is what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Good point, Michael Patrick. Thank you.
Kelly Rossman is with us. I'm Michael Patrick Shields. We're back in a flash with the rebuttals on that question. Stay tuned.